This is the audio of the script for Group 4 doing the Great Migration in the PM class. This is based on material from Episode 8, which was about the economic boom from 1900 to 1929, from the video series from the History Channel, America, The Story of Us. This group will be doing their presentation on March 8th, Tuesday. Introduction, Irina. What is the Great Migration? The Great Migration was the movement of 6 million African Americans out of the rural southern United States to the urban Northeast, Midwest, and West that occurred between 1910 and 1970. They moved from 14 states of the South, especially Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas. Georgia was especially affected, seeing net declines in its African American population for 3 consecutive decades after 1920. Some historians differentiate between a first Great Migration from 1910 to 1930, which saw about 1.6 million people move from mostly rural areas to northern industrial cities, and a second Great Migration, which took place from 1940 until 1970, which began after the Great Depression and brought at least 5 million people, including many townspeople with urban skills, to the north and to California and other western states. By the end of the Second Great Migration, African Americans had become an urbanized population. More than 80% of blacks lived in cities. A bare majority of 53% remained in the South, while 40% lived in the North. Stan will continue with the next part of our presentation. Great Migration, Expectations from the North. 1914, America is booming. In just 4 years, the economy doubles. America is poised to become the richest nation on earth. 3 generations from the end of slavery, black Southerners are on the move in search of a better life. Between 1915 and 1930, 1.5 million head north. 1 in 7 of the entire African American population of the United States. It's called the Great Migration. And it should be capitalized. Without the increase in job opportunities caused by World War I, the Great Migration might never have occurred. The fighting in Europe dramatically increased the demands on companies in the United States to produce munitions and other goods to support the war effort. Economic gain was not the sole reason migrants came north. There were also better educational opportunities. Another reason that made northern life attractive was the sense of personal freedom migrants felt after leaving the South. Northern cities were busy and impersonal. They offered greater anonymity than many African Americans had experienced in southern rural communities. One of the key factors influencing the individuals who did leave was the letters and visits they received from friends and relatives who had already moved north. When World War I changed the job markets, earlier migrants wrote letters home, urging others to come north. as Al Sharpton, this was his quote, I believe, as Al Sharpton says, the North represented the promised land to blacks in the South. If you can go north, you can work. If you can go north, you're not going to have to step off the curve when whites walk down the block. If you can go north, you can live in better neighborhoods and your children get a better education. They were not looking to change the world, like the Western pioneers of an earlier day. They just wanted to improve their own status. They came from all parts of the South, hoping for a chance to improve their own station, or at least that of their children. Many found that the Promised Land was not the promise they thought. The North was better than the South, but it was not the land of milk and honey. Next, Valeria will continue with the next part of our presentation. Thank you, Stan. Hi, everybody. I'm Valeria. By the end of 1919, some 1 million blacks had left the South, usually traveling by train, boat, or bus. A smaller number had automobiles or even horse-drawn carts. In the decade between 1910 and 1920, the black population of major northern cities grew by large percentages, including New York, 66%, Chicago, 148%, Philadelphia, 500%, and Detroit, 611%. Many new arrivals found jobs in factories, slaughterhouses, and foundries, where working conditions were arduous and sometimes dangerous. Female migrants had a harder time finding work, spurring heated competition for domestic labor positions. Aside from competition for employment, there was also competition for living space in the increasingly crowded cities. While segregation was not legalized in the North, as it was in the South, racism and prejudice were widespread. Some residential neighborhoods required white property owners to agree not to sell to blacks. These laws would remain legal until the court struck them down in 1948. Rising rents in segregated areas, plus a resurgence of KKK activity after 1915, worsened black and white relations across the country. The summer of 1919 began the greatest period of interracial strife in U.S. history, including a disturbing wave of race riots. The most serious took place in Chicago in July 1919. It lasted 13 days and left 38 people dead, 537 injured, and 1,000 black families without homes. That was the Red Summer. So African American people didn't find the land of milk and honey in the North, and now many, in fact, are moving back to the South. So African American, so many African American people didn't find the land of milk and honey in the North, and now they are moving back to the South. Let's welcome Alfredo, who will tell you about it. Alfredo. Thank you, Valeria. Why are African Americans moving back to the South? After decades of moving north, thousands are now returning to their southern roots for economic and cultural reasons. For most of the 20th century, blacks were buying one-way tickets out of the Jim Crow South in hopes of a better life. Nearly 6 million African Americans followed the railroads to places like Detroit and Chicago, never dreaming that their children and grandchildren would someday lead a return migration, chasing the American dream back down the Mississippi and straight across the Mason-Dixie line. The Great Migration slowly eased in the 1970s as the North's economic fortunes began to dim, and the South's racial climate began to improve. But it wasn't until the 2000 census when the South posted its first black population increase in more than a century that demographers started to really take notice. By 2010, about 57% of the nation's African Americans were living in the South, a higher percentage than at any time in 50 years. The South, to be sure, has been a population magnet for people of all races since the end of World War II. The region was the top destination for newcomers between 1997 and 2011. The search for roots and the urge to explore their African American heritage is a key motivator for some of the new migration's youngest participants. Many are the first, second, or third generations to be born in northern cities. Some of the returned migrants are retirees, while others are college-educated young people driven by economic realities, historical curiosity, and the old-fashioned American drive to explore new frontiers and create new worlds. Many things are cheaper: local taxes, homes and property taxes. In fact, the whole cost of living is cheaper. If you want to relax, the South is home. Thank you, everyone, for listening to our presentation. Everybody from my group, come up. Yes, come up. We would like to thank you for your attention. Thank you so much.